Can everybody see? Can you hear me okay?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you just a little bit. So Paul's going to work with the volume. But happy Tuesday, everybody. We are doing this in the studio and at Jen's house. And but we are committed, right? We are committed. We're not giving up even when our lives have a lot going on, just like yours. We're not going to fall down, and we're not going to stop trying. And so thank you, Jen. She's a lot going on, yet she said, "Can we do it? Can I do it from my house tonight?" I said, "Yes, we can do that." So Paul's just doing a few things on our side here to make sure that it's working. But I think you can see me, right? I can see you, Jen. So this is good. And if you guys, I'm just gonna check on my phone what I can see and what I can hear. And if you're here with us tonight, throw something in the comments. That would be great.
Can Jen hear you?
That'd be great. Just like yours. Jen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. She can hear me. All right. And I was just, sorry, I'm just watching us. I'm watching us on Facebook. So just see.
Making sure we're live.
Yeah. Just making sure we're live. Just making sure we're doing the same thing at the same time. We think we are, but it's always good when we really are. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. I know we got a couple people on here, and we're really grateful that you're here. I like, Jen, how you are actually like sitting, how Paul is like floating your head in the place where you're normally sitting. So that seems so very appropriate, right? So it's good. So we are in Luke 22, and it is a long chapter.
Mm-hmm.
It is a long chapter, but we are going to plow through it. If we can't get finished, we'll let you know, but we're going to try to just plow through it. Does that sound good, Jen?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Okay. We love plowing. That's it.
Tell her to talk some more.
Jen, will you talk a little bit more? Paul wants to make sure we're not getting reverb or something.
Sure. Why I'm home is because we are getting an appraisal done tomorrow, and I needed to get the house kind of ready for that process. So it was a lot to get that all done and drive in. So we're doing it remotely today.
I like it.
And so you may hear other sounds because my husband is home. Jason's home, so he doesn't grasp the whole idea that I need him to be quiet. So you may hear background noise.
It's no big deal, right? It's no big deal. So, Miss Joy just said hello, and then I just put in the comments, can you hear us okay? So if you can hear us okay, if you would just throw that in the comments so that we can make sure you can hear us okay. So anyway, we are good, and we are good to go. So chapter 22, Jen, we are almost to the end of Luke.
Yes.
Luke only has 24 chapters. So we're like, I think I heard someone say we're in the shadow of the cross, basically, at this point. And nearing, well, we're headed straight for the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, we won't actually get there tonight. That's not chapter 22, but we're doing everything leading up to it. So there's a lot to cover. So I think that is good. Do you have anything to add, Jen?
Nope. We can just start
Yeah,
digging in.
we can dig in. Go ahead whenever
All
you're ready.
righty. All righty. We are starting in verse 1 of Luke 22. The festival of unleavened bread, which begins with the Passover celebration, was drawing near. The leading priests and teachers of religious law were actively plotting Jesus' murder, but they wanted to kill him without starting a riot, a possibility that they greatly feared. So it's plotting like they've always been plotting.
Plotting. That's right.
Go ahead. You want me to just keep going?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. We're going to continue in verse 3. Then Satan entered into Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12 disciples, and he went over to the leading priests and captains of the temple guard to discuss the best way to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted that he was ready to help them, and they promised him a reward. So he began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus so they could arrest him quietly when the crowds weren't around.
There we go. So here we are. All the males, it says 12 and over, they're all required to go to Jerusalem for the Passover and for the feast of unleavened bread that comes afterwards. And so this is kind of setting the scene of what's going on. But we see here that Judas is basically selling out, and he's selling Jesus out here. And it could have been that he was trying to force Jesus's hand, to kind of like force him to be the Messiah. It could have been he didn't believe he was the Messiah anymore. We don't really know, but it does say that the fact that Satan came into Judas does not take away that personal responsibility that Judas had in betraying Jesus Christ. So Judas allowed that to happen, and so here we are. Oh,
Yep.
thank you. Joy just posted. She said Jen is very loud, and you are not as loud. So we have.
Whoops. I can speak softly.
No, you're fine. You're the one who's reading the word, so that's important. I'll see if I can find Paul again. But yeah, that's it's funny too. The commentary says that Satan didn't really know what was going to happen. Satan may have thought that, like, after he killed Jesus, that, or if Jesus was crucified on the cross, or if Jesus was put to death, that the plan would be done. Satan didn't know that Jesus was gonna raise from the dead. So maybe Satan knew something, but I don't know that. We can't assume that Satan knew everything. So anyway, it's just very interesting. So that is all I have to say about that.
All righty. Well, we'll continue in verse 7.
Okay.
Now the festival of unleavened bread arrived. When the Passover lambs were sacrificed, Jesus sent Peter and John ahead and said, "Go and prepare the Passover meal so we can eat it together." "Where do you want us to go?" they asked him. He replied, "As soon as you enter Jerusalem, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you. Follow him at the house he enters. So say to the owner, 'The teacher asks, where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?' He will take you upstairs to a large room that is already set up. This is the place. Go ahead and prepare our supper there." They went off to the city and found everything just as Jesus had said, and they prepared the Passover supper there.
There we go. Some people like to throw a what do you call it? A miracle in here, and they're like, "It's a miracle." I don't know that it's a miracle. Like, Jesus may have actually just set this up, like where to have Passover. He may have set it up previously. I don't know. So, um, I think we can assume that everything Jesus does is just miraculous, but I don't know that I think he knew this guy who lived in this house where they were going to have the Last Supper. So, um, oh, okay. I don't know if you guys can see some of the comments. Pastor Dan is watching. Hi, Pastor Dan. Good to have you with us. And Paul says that I have a noise reducer on mine because I'm in a little room and I have an air conditioner in here because otherwise I would be pouring sweat. So, I don't know. I'll try to talk loud. Woohoo! Whatever it takes, whatever it takes. So, but anyway, so that they're getting ready and they're going to be preparing the Passover, just like they said. But it was funny. It said in the commentary that like normally women go and get water, and so they said they're looking for a man who has water, and he probably would have really stood out in the crowd because usually the women are the ones that went and got the water. So I thought that was kind of a funny thing there. Yeah, Jen, do you have anything about that?
No, I don't think so. Other than, that the Passover is commemorating Israel's escape from Egypt. So that's why they're having Passover.
There you go. Every year.
Yep.
Year. It's around the time of Easter, right? So, and so that's when we all we line up, right? The Jewish faith and the Christians, we all kind of line up there right around Passover. They're celebrating Passover. We're celebrating Easter. So,
and it's
those same weeks.
It's called Passover, correct? Because they put the blood of the lamb over the doorways so that when the angel of death came across Egypt, it passed over.
Over. That's right. The house of all of the oldest males. So, and Pharaoh did not have the blood, and so his oldest son died. So, yeah, Passover, kind of something funky, but obviously it was very prophetic, looking forward. It's the tradition of Passover then, even kind of worked its way into the tradition then of the resurrection and the Last Supper, and all of those things were just precursors. If you've ever had Passover, if you've ever gone to a Seder, they hide, they have the afikomen, which they hide like a piece of bread for the end, and then it's kind of discovered, and so that's also a foreshadowing of Christ. And so anyway, Passover is a very interesting study. We'll have to study it together someday. So there we go.
All right. We'll move along. Verse 14 of Luke 22. Then at the proper time, Jesus and the 12 apostles sat down together at the table. Jesus said, I have looked forward to this hour with deep longing, anxious to eat this Passover meal with you before my suffering begins. For I tell you now that I won't eat it again until it comes to fulfillment in the kingdom of God. Then he took a cup of wine, and when he had given thanks for it, he said, take this and share it among yourselves, for I will not drink wine again until the kingdom of God has come. Then he took a loaf of bread, and when he had thanked God for it, he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. After supper, he took another cup of wine and said, this wine is the token of God's new covenant to save you, an agreement sealed with the blood I will pour out for you. But here at this table, sitting among us as a friend, is the man who will betray me. For I, the Son of Man, must die, since it is part of God's plan. but how terrible it will be for my betrayer." Then the disciples began to ask each other which of them would ever do such a thing. And they began to argue among themselves as to who would be the greatest in the coming kingdom. Jesus told them, "In this world, the kings and great men order their people around, and yet they are called friends of the people. But among you, those who are the greatest should take the lowest rank, and the leader should be like a servant. Normally, the master sits at the table and is served by his servant, but not here, for I am your servant. You have remained true to me in my time of trial, and just as my Father has granted me a kingdom, I now grant you the right to eat and drink at my table in the kingdom. And you will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel."
There we go. So that's the Last Supper story. You've probably heard those verses before. They talk about, these are the verses that we read when we drink of the grape juice or the fruit of the vine, and the verses that we read when we take the bread. And so do this in remembrance of me, quite literally, that is verse 19. There we go. And that's exactly what we're supposed to do. He doesn't say when we're supposed to do it, but he says that whenever we do it, we're supposed to think back to the time of this Last Supper and forward, obviously, a couple days to the time where he would then hang on a cross for our sins, die, and then be raised again. And so this is a commandment, basically, that we need to do this. Doesn't say when, doesn't say how often, doesn't say a lot of stuff, but it says that we're supposed to do it, and we're supposed to remember Jesus Christ's sacrifice when we do. So there we go. Let's see. I liked how he mentioned the thing about that somebody is going to betray him, and it says that, well, obviously it says, "Woe to the man who's going to betray him." I believe that. But isn't it funny that they all kind of started talking about, they were all questioning among themselves who would do that. And, and let's be honest, like, I could have been the betrayer. You could have been the betrayer. Like, anybody could have, we do betray Christ sometimes, right? We go off on our own way. This is the ultimate betrayal, obviously, and this was foretold in, it's one of the greatest betrayal of all history. But they didn't know. Like, they're going, am I the one? Am I the one who's going to betray him? And I think that, that shows their humanity. It shows our humanity when we talk about that too. Like, we're not perfect either. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And then did you see, Jen, and then right in the next verse in 24, they go from betraying him to
arguing who's the best.
Who's getting the biggest house and the biggest car and the biggest, the place at the table or whatever, the fanciest loafers. It's like, who's going to be the important one when Jesus brings up his kingdom. Remember, they still didn't know at this point. They didn't know what was going to happen, but they were concerned. And it says in verse 25, it says, Jesus said, "And those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors, but you are not to be like that." And they're like, "What?" But Jesus, we're the ones who are hanging out with you. We deserve the best place. We deserve that. Jesus is not talking about that. Jesus is talking about being a servant, and those among you, the one, oh, I can't remember. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? And so He's talking about you need to be servant leaders, people, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to them. Probably still doesn't make a lot of sense to us today. Um, but it does say in verse 30, it says that they are going to be they're going to be at his table in the kingdom and judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So um, if he is referring to the 12 disciples there, the 12 apostles rather, I think that's pretty fair that these guys would have a special place, because these are the first ones out of the gate, the first ones who, obviously Judas doesn't get to be there, but he gets replaced. He gets replaced by another one. So
He made his decision.
he did.
And he has to, I think that's one of the things that we miss a lot is that, choices have consequences. And we're kind of like in a society right now where people don't want to have consequences for actions. And that's just not the way it works. So the sooner you kind of realize that, the choices you make, the things you say, the way you act, all have consequences.
They do. We teach our children that, but yet then we feel like we're exempt from that somehow. Like that's not it. That's not it, people. So yes. Do you have anything else?
Nope.
I think I was just gonna add that in the commentary, in the book of Mark and in the book of John, we know that the betrayer was Judas Iscariot, even though it doesn't really say that yet here. But when he talked about his betrayer, and they were thinking, is it me? Is it me? Judas knew. He's like, oh yeah, I already did the whole mess, so I'm the one, and I'm the betrayer. But Jesus said, like, woe to the man who betrays me. So but yeah, this whole idea of how God's kingdom is very different than our kingdom, right? It says that it says in the commentary that worldly leaders are selfish and arrogant. They stab everybody in the back to climb their way to the top. And in God's kingdom, the best leaders are servants, and they're the ones asking the people they know, how can I help you? How can I help you? Not what can you do for me? How can I suck the life out of you to get me closer to the top? It's how can I serve you better? How can I serve you better? So we've always said that, like, the kingdom of God is like our world, or our society just turned on its head, and this is just another great example of that. So the best leaders are servants. There we go. All right, Jen, I'm done.
Alrighty, so we will pick back up in verse 31 of Luke 22. Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to have all of you, to sift you like wheat, but I have pleaded in prayer for you, Simon, that your faith should not fail. So when you have repented and turned to me again, strengthen and build up your brothers. Peter said, Lord, I am ready to go to prison with you and even to die with you. But Jesus said, Peter, let me tell you something. The rooster will not crow tomorrow morning until you have denied 3 times that you even know me. Then Jesus asked them, when I sent you out to preach the good news and you did not have any money, a traveler's bag or extra clothing, did you lack anything? No, they replied. But now, he said, take your money and a traveler's bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your clothes and buy one. For the time has come for this prophecy about me to be fulfilled. He was counted among those who were rebels. Yes, everything written about me by the prophets will come true. Lord, they replied, we have two swords among us. That's enough, he said.
So I I love that in verse 32, well, in verse 31, Jesus is saying, Simon Peter, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat, right? Just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like what Job went through. You know, we know that crazy story. Um, but in verse 32, Jesus says, "But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail." And that is that's just so very comforting. It's, you know, that Jesus is our true intercessor. He is praying for us that our faith will not fail. Like I don't I don't imagine he's not praying for the unbelievers, but he's praying for those who are covered by his blood, the believers. He's praying for us that our faith won't fail, and that makes all the difference, because you know we're gonna look here at this dichotomy between how what happened to Judas when he had a failure and what happened to Peter when he had a failure, and you know, two very big different outcomes there. But what a blessing that, you know, that we can know that Jesus is praying for us, that our faith won't fail. Um, and so, and then of course, you know, Peter, you know, Jen and I love to laugh about Peter because he's always like,
Gung ho.
yes, his bravado. He's always like, I would never do that, Lord. I would never, you know, walk away from you. And Jesus is like, yeah, you're going to do that tonight. So, and you know, obviously Peter does, but he will redeem himself. I can tell you the end of the story. Um, and then remember when Jesus sent them out prior, and he
Mm-hmm.
said, go out with no money, no cloak, no, you know, whatever. It was, there's a very big list. I can't remember. What else was it, Jen? It's like, no.
They had no extras. It was the clothes on your back, and that's it.
Yeah, just trust me, right? Just God's going to provide. And so it's very interesting. And here he is like, take your, you know, take your passport, take your traveler's checks, like take a bag. And this time he says, take a weapon, like take a sword. And if you don't have one, go buy one. So that's kind of an interesting foreshadowing to the persecution that is coming for them. And so, um, so that was very interesting. You know, a very interesting change there. I don't, I can't remember what the, what the commentary says about that, but I guess it just, they're going to need to be prepared. They're going to need to be
Yeah,
prepared.
it says they would be facing hatred and persecution and would need to be prepared.
Yeah, that's it. It's
Yeah.
going to be a little bit different than before. Now people know Jesus. They hate Jesus. You know, Jesus is kind of, he's gone over the popular phase of his ministry, and now people are turning on him. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of that coming up here in these next few days of this story. And so, yes, Jesus wants them to be prepared. But it's funny, they said in verse 38, they said, oh, Lord, we've got two swords. And he's like, that's enough. So I guess they didn't need to have like a militia. It's like, no, don't worry about taking every gun you have or whatever, every sword you have. You got two? Good enough. That's fine. Pack them up. Get the bag going. Let's you know, let's hit the road. So that was pretty cool.
Alrighty.
Alrighty.
We're moving on to the garden. I want to go to the garden. I
Yes.
know.
Has anybody been? I don't know if anybody on has been to has been to Jerusalem. I have all this stuff, but like in my little Bible, I have like a little map of Jerusalem right here. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
in your book too, Jen. The lower city and where the temple is, and then where the Mount of Olives is, and the Garden of Gethsemane, and they still know where those things are today, of course. So yes, we'll get there. Israel's a little complicated right now, so
Yeah.
maybe we'll give them time to relax. But
Yeah.
that is a dream trip that I get to see it while I'm still on this earth. I can
Yeah.
see it from heaven. That's fine too, Lord. But I'd love to go there. Jen and I are making plans. Always
Yes.
making plans.
All right. Well, let's journey with Jesus to the garden. We are in verse 39 of Luke 22. Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, "Pray that you will not be overcome by temptation." He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will, not mine." Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. At last he stood up again and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked. "Get up and pray. Otherwise, temptation will overpower you."
Yeah. So I always hear a lot about this. You know, they always said they fell asleep in the garden. They fell asleep in the garden, and I would love to say that I would not do that, but these men who loved Jesus and were with him at the time and saw the miracles, they fell asleep. So you know, I may too have fallen asleep, so I can't judge them too harshly. But he says that, you know, right off the bat in verse 40, he said, "Pray so that you will not fall into temptation." And so, like, what I mean, I know that we have like the temptation to sleep, obviously, but there is going to be a bigger temptation here because in these next days, um, in these next moments, right before they arrest Jesus, you know, all of the apostles are going to start to doubt, like, is this really the Messiah? Because is this the way that he would have done this? You know, that there's going to be a temptation to believe that Jesus deceived them, right?
Right.
That Jesus was not the Messiah. So there's that temptation too, and that's a bigger temptation than just sleep.
Mhm.
And so you know, now they don't know that Jesus is warning them against all of this. But if you pray, if you keep up with your prayers, you will be able to hit those temptations that you don't even know about. You'll be able to hit them stronger and harder, and they won't you know cause you to fall away or cause you to be tempted, because you've got the power of God behind you. So just a great little insight there about why we should pray and pray to be strong, in Jesus Christ. So um, Jen, what do you think in verse 42? It really sounds like Jesus doesn't want to go through with this.
I think he may have wanted more time,
Yeah, that could be.
you know, more
That could
time
be.
to get the disciples ready, more time to bring people, to him. I don't necessarily believe that he didn't want to go through with it.
Right.
He knew what the cost was going to be. I just think maybe it was like, can we just hold off on this for a little bit?
Yeah. Or hey, is there another way? are, you, are you
Yeah.
sure this is the only way? Are you sure? Because obviously it's a really that's a rough road. But you're right. Jesus never said like, I'm not doing this. He
Yeah.
actually reaffirmed. He said, no, I'm going to do what you want me to do. Father, I'm here, I'm doing your work. So, I'm a piece of you, but let's do this together. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think that has tripped me up a lot. It's like, oh yeah, does Jesus not want to do this? Like, no, he didn't say that. He didn't say he didn't want to. He didn't say he wouldn't. um I think he's just checking, or like you said, maybe he wants more time. So, and
Well, and also it's a great example for us to follow. To put aside our wants and desires for what God wants.
yeah, yeah, sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
obedience. Yeah,
Yeah.
sacrifice and obedience. And then in verse 44, Luke, who's the doctor, right? Dr. Luke, he's the only one that mentions Jesus's sweat is like drops of blood. And
Yeah.
so, of course, the doctor would come up with that detail, right? So, so that's kind of cool. I don't know. I've heard people like scientists, they've come up with like a whole like biological explanation of like how he could have literally sweat drops of blood. I I don't know that. I mean, it's important, but like that's probably not the big thing there. For the big thing for me is that he was in anguish. He was in anguish, and so, um, so those, like the sweat, like drops of blood, or they were drops of blood. That just, says to me like he was in sincere anguish. But it says in 43 that an angel appeared to him, like ministering angels. Like, yay, that's great. Ministering angels were right there with Jesus, and it says that they were strengthening him. Whether that's like a pep talk, or they're like, let us give you your favorite food, whatever it was, they were strengthening him. So that's pretty amazing. Um, but then, 46, they're sleeping again. So there you go. They're sleeping. God bless those sweet apostles. They are sleeping. So, and he says again about get up and pray so you don't fall into temptation. You're going to get your mind is going to get very warped, and you're going to get very scared. We know that they're going to flee in short order here. And so their mind and their soul and their spirit needs to be very strong against that temptation to react and think, like the people they were before they met Jesus. There you go.
Kind of to remain focused.
Exactly. So powerful, right? To be able to, because you need to be able to to fight the enemy. Literally, temptation is a very easy tool for Satan, because we're easily tempted. Sorry, we just are, and he usually knows how to push our buttons. So, anyway, that is all I got for that.
All righty, we'll pick back up in verse 47 of Luke 22. But even as he said this, a mob approached, led by Judas, one of his 12 disciples. Judas walked over to Jesus and greeted him with a kiss. But Jesus said, Judas, how can you betray me, the Son of Man, with a kiss? When the other disciples saw what was about to happen, they exclaimed, Lord, should we fight? We brought the swords. And one of them slashed at the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, don't resist anymore. And he touched the place where the man's ear had been and healed him. Then Jesus spoke to the leading priests and captains of the temple guard and the other leaders who headed the mob. Am I some dangerous criminal, he asked, that you have come armed with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day. But this is your moment, the time when the power of darkness reigns.
There we go. So here we are. It's at nighttime, and there's a couple different laws. There's a couple different Mosaic laws that they are breaking, and I can just kind of fast forward a little. They're not allow him to. They're not allowed to try him at night. They're not allowed to have a trial at night, and they will. The priest is it. It says that the priest is not to rent his robe, to tear his robe, and he does because of this. And then they're not supposed to give like a decision for a trial on the same day, and they do. And so they were so they were so they're in a hurry. They were in a hurry to execute him. They wanted this done, right? They wanted this done before Sabbath so that they could get on with celebrating Passover. So they were in a hurry. They wanted to get it done anyway. Let's be honest. They were done with Jesus and all that they felt that he was he was making a mess as far as they were concerned, because he was turning so many ideas about God on its head. So so here we are at night, and Jesus knew it was coming. A lot of places in the world, men, women, whatever, they greet each other with a kiss, and so I think that's the saying, right, Jen? Being betrayed with a kiss, and so wasn't necessarily strange. That was kind of how people greeted each other, how people still greet each other in other cultures. But that was the sign that Judas gave the high priest, and said, yeah, the one that I kiss is going to be the one. I don't know why they didn't know who he was. Maybe because it was dark.
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to get it wrong, because there's always like a crowd around Jesus. But
well, I think also they did it at night because they didn't want a riot or commotion. So they wanted to do it secretly.
Yeah, pretty smart.
So that there wouldn't be an uproar,
mm-hmm.
or some kind of, fight back from the people.
Yeah. Yep, that's it. So it is important. That was wise of them, because there were still a lot of people that loved Jesus and probably wouldn't have allowed that to happen. But then, I don't know. But then mob mentality, they all start turning and went a little crazy. We learned in the book of John that in verse 50 that it was Peter. No
Mm-hmm.
surprise. It was Peter who cut the ear off of it says the servant of the high priest. He cut his ear off. And Peter was, I guess he was a good guy to have around, He's like, I got you. I got your back, Lord. Hold on. They just cut off his ear. Maybe he was going for his head and missed. He cut off his ear. And then in verse 51, that is the last healing that Jesus is going to do. Basically, the last healing of his ministry before his resurrection. So beautiful that he healed his enemy, basically. So that's a great example for us today. And then and it's just kind of funny when he says in verse 52, like, I was around every day in the synagogue. So
yeah.
But now it's all changed. Now you're coming after me. But I was just around in the synagogue, just chatting it up with the people. But like you said, Jen, they definitely didn't want to do this in the daylight in front of
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Yep.
So there you go.
Yep. Let's go ahead and pick back up in verse 54 of Luke 22.
Yeah.
So they arrested him and led him to the high priest's residence, and Peter was following far behind. The guards lit a fire in the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. Finally, she said, "This man was one of Jesus' followers." Peter denied it. "Woman," he said, "I don't even know the man." And while and after a while, someone else looked at him and said, "You must be one of them." "No, man, I'm not," Peter replied. About an hour later, someone else insisted, "This must be one of Jesus' disciples because he is a Galilean or Galilean? Galilean?
Either one.
Two. But Peter said, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." And as soon as he said these words, the rooster crowed. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered that the Lord had said, "Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter left the courtyard crying bitterly. Now the guards in charge of Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him, then they hit him and asked, "Who hit you that time, you prophet?" And they threw all sorts of terrible insults at him.
Yeah. So, like we said again in verse 54, they were in a hurry. They were in a hurry to get him executed, probably, before the people had a chance to kind of turn, maybe turn their public opinion again, but they wanted to hurry up and execute him, get it done before the Sabbath so they could get going, with the Passover celebration and the Feast of Unleavened Bread celebration. They didn't want Jesus to have to cramp their style anymore. And of course they really felt that he was blasphemous, and so they were in a hurry. But it's a little hard to understand for me, like I need to see it. Did I miss this scene in The Chosen? They haven't done this scene yet, right?
No.
Because we're not there yet. I'm like, I would
Mm-mm.
love to see this, like somebody really thought it through, because Peter followed them. There's some kind of courtyard, and like somehow Jesus can see Peter, but Peter's also being seen by all these other people who are thinking that he is with Jesus. um and so I kind of want to see them set that stage so that I can better kind of visualize it. I'm trying. I'm just not that creative.
I don't know if they did that in the Passion of the Christ. I don't know if they did that. I do know that he sees Mary, his mother, in
Yeah.
Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
There's a visual of where he looks and can see her down an alleyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember if they had that same kind of
If they did it
thing.
when they were, well, I mean, they were starting here to they're starting here to torture him.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is it's a game. Basically they hand them over to the Roman guards, and the Roman guards get to do whatever they want with them, with the prisoners, and torture them however they want. So I read in another commentary, this was a game frequently called hot hand. And so
Mm-hmm.
you would blindfold them and hit them, and then they had to guess who hit them or who didn't hit them, and obviously it's just cruel. And then it says that they hurled insults at him, so I can't even imagine what that would be. And so this was the beginning of, it said that his face, it doesn't say it right in this point, but his face was so bruised that he was unrecognizable. So
Mm-hmm.
this was the beginning of that reality, hitting him about the face over and over and over. So, um, But Peter did exactly what Jesus said he would, and it's pretty. It it says in the commentary, it says for verse 60. Do you see that, Jen? It says sin, like cancer, has a way of growing if it is unchecked. So notice the progression of how Peter disowned Jesus. In 57, he denied knowing him. In 58, he denied being one of his followers. In verse 60, he denied even knowing what they were talking about. Okay, so sin, it says it has a way of spreading, and as it does, the corruption gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is exactly what was happening with Peter. He wasn't just denying Jesus, then he was denying being a follower, and then he was even like denying that, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm just accidentally stopping here, whatever, so it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and that's what sin does. It's like cancer. It just continues to grow, unchecked, if you don't stop it. And that is the great thing about Peter, is that in verse 62 it says he went away weeping bitterly. So he was feeling it. It doesn't say like back in 49 that Judas was having remorse. Judas will eventually, but he didn't at this point. But basically, Peter, as soon as he realized he had failed Jesus, he had instant remorse, and he was really upset with himself. And that's also going to be part of the reason why their stories end so differently. So
Yeah, in the commentary here too, it said that Peter wept bitterly, not only because he realized that he had denied his Lord, the Messiah, but also because he had turned away from a very dear friend, a person who had loved and taught him for 3 years. Peter had said that he would never deny Christ, despite Jesus's prediction. But when frightened, he went against all he had boldly promised, unable to stand up for his Lord for even 12 hours. He had failed as a disciple and as a friend. We need to be aware of our own breaking points and not become overconfident or self-sufficient. If we fail him, we must remember that Christ can use those who recognize their failure. From this humiliating experience, Peter learned much that would help him later when he assumed leadership of the young church.
I love that. Because that led to making Peter an amazing leader. Is that he was able to see his humanity, understand it a little bit, and then be absolutely forgiven by Jesus. And he says, look, and we know that Moses failed, we know that David failed, we know that Solomon failed. We're in good company here with a whole bunch of failures for God. But it's like, what do you do with that? Because if you do like Judas did and you just turn away, then your failure becomes your demise, rather than, like, I think you said that
Peter learned much that would help him later.
Yeah.
So learning experience, he learned, not to deny Christ.
Yeah. Could we have the humility to learn from our failures rather than hiding them, like we want to do, so that we don't look human, so that we don't look like, the rest of the world. But we are the rest of the world. We're all sinners, but we just want to do better, and be having humility and learning from what we did wrong. That set Peter up for success. I'll say success. He basically was there and was so very responsible with Jesus for the foundation of the church. So God used him, and God can use us if we're not so Judas like.
And I mean, that's a term that's used, it's synonymous with betrayal. The
Yeah.
name Judas,
Yeah.
everybody knows, even people that I think like aren't biblical or aren't religious, or they know what that means.
Yeah, you don't name your kid Judas.
Yeah, when somebody says you Judas, you know what that means.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
still used, it's still used today.
Mm-hmm. There you go. All right. I see it's already 8 o'clock. We're almost done. We're almost
Yes, we
done.
have just a few more. Okay,
Just a
I'll
few
read real
more.
fast. At daybreak, all the leaders of the people assembled, including the leading priests and the teachers of religious law. Jesus was led before this high council, and they said, "Tell us if you are the Messiah." But he replied, "If I tell you, you won't believe me, and if I ask you a question, you won't answer. But the time is soon coming when I, the Son of Man, will be sitting at God's right hand in the palace, in the place of power." They all shouted, "Then you claim you are the Son of God?" And he replied, "You are right in saying that I am. What need do we have for other witnesses?" They shouted. "We ourselves heard him say it."
Yeah. We heard it from our own lips. From our own lips. So this is the begin or part of this his trial here, or one of his trials. And so the chief priests and the teachers, they're making these charges. The first charge is verse 67. If you are the Christ, tell us. That's the first charge, right? And then of course Jesus says, like, well, if I tell you, you're not going to believe me, and all that stuff. So then the second charge is in verse 70. Are you then the Son of God? And in verse 70, he says, "You are right in saying I am." That's like the idiomatic way, right, of saying, yes, that's me. That is me. I am the Son of God. And so that is all they needed to hear. They had decided that he deserved death. But of course, this is the trial for the Jewish leaders. This is the Jewish trial. He also has to have a Roman trial before anybody can be put to death. They also need to have a Roman trial. We'll look at next time. They're actually going to completely change the charges, because the charges here are not punishable by death in the Romans' eyes. So they have to change the charges, and they will. Um, you know, they're crafty. They're crafty, and they want him dead. But that's this is the first. This is the first trial, basically, but it's enough for them. They knew before they even had this. Like, we want him dead. We want him dead. That's all we want. So that's, yeah. Here we go. Here we go.
Yep.
Let's see. Jen, do you see in verse 70 in the commentary how it talks about blasphemy? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what blasphemy is?
Blasphemy, the sin of claiming to be God or of attacking God's authority and majesty in any way, was punished by death. The Jewish leaders had the evidence they wanted.
Yeah. So blasphemy, we still talk about blasphemy today, right?
Yeah.
We've had people come into our church, and we had one man in particular, and he said, "I am Jesus. I am the Messiah." So, and we're all like, "Yeah, we've already had him. He already came." That's like, well, that was the New Testament. Like, unless you're coming down on the cloud, which you didn't, you walked in here. So we would say that that's blasphemy, right? And they obviously, they didn't understand that the Messiah was standing in front of them. But this is prophecy as well, that his own people that the Jewish people would turn against the Messiah, kill him, and he would be raised again in 3 days, to save everybody. But so blasphemy is a thing. It was a thing back then, not punishable by death now, but we don't appreciate it.
No.
Like, it's weird. It is weird. So that's kind of the end of that. Jen, do you have anything extra?
I don't think so.
Well,
hold on to your socks, because we're just gonna get into more deviousness.
Oh yeah, talk about like some mafia type trials, like some backroom deals. It's all gonna happen. It's all gonna happen here in these next 2 chapters, but it's okay, because if you read the beginning of Luke 24, there's some good news there too, because at the end of 3 days, up from the grave he arose. That's a song.
In the end, God wins.
He always wins. We have to go through we have to learn about this yucky stuff to get to the end where God wins. And so that's great. Jen, I know your audio is a little better, so do you want to roll through what we have coming up next for our Bible studies?
Yep. On Wednesday, we are going to have a Bible study at 7, and at the same place you're currently on. And you're in Corinthians still, 1 Corinthians.
1 Corinthians.
And then on Thursday is Pastor Dan and Pastor Gay, and they are in Genesis. And then on Sunday, we have church service at 5 o'clock. And then on Tuesday, you are back with us, and hopefully soon with Pastor Paul and John.
Yes, hopefully soon. I imagine it's going to be sooner than you think. It's going to be good. So that is all we have. Jen, thank you for joining us from your home. If you didn't catch the beginning, I'm in the studio. Jen's at home. She has like this huge project going on, and so she agreed to still do this, and through technology we can do it this way. And so hallelujah.
It saved me 3 hours for driving in.